All right. Yeah, this is another PayPal patron from Liz, and this was the interview. I said, because yeah, she said no, I don't think I have any more interviews, but this was the one, and this is I'm pretty sure this is after Neil Pitt has died. I think, not sure, but anyway, and yeah, also I've been up since 2 o'clock in the morning. It's now 7:30 in the morning. This is the last reaction I'm gonna do. I don't know how long I'm gonna make it through this, but hopefully we'll get halfway at least, or at least 20 minutes. But yeah, um, Rush full interview, House of Strombo. Let's go.
Hello, hello.
I was looking online the other day and I found an interview that I did with Neil 10 years ago on the 30th anniversary, and we did a track by track on moving pictures on the 30th. And it was really interesting because what he said was, this was one of the records for you where you weren't getting as much pressure to be something that somebody else wanted you to be. Like, by this point, Rush was Rush now. And there was a freedom in this record that maybe you didn't have in the first handful. And that this was a record where you got to just be yourselves. Did you guys feel that way as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of felt like we always were ourselves, but it didn't always work out.
Yeah. In our minds, we were.
We made a lot of mistakes because we were so determined to be ourselves. And from the minute Neil came into the band in '74, something shifted because his presence was a confirmation of he had a willingness to experiment in the same way that Alex and I had already been, going down that road in a way. So it was like a confirmation. It was like the circle had been closed. And so we kept experimenting. And sometimes we got a little sidetracked, like with Caress of Steel. It's a pretty weird record in hindsight, but...
See, but I love that record because when I was young and I heard that, it was a metal record. And I heard Caress of Steel and went, that's what got me into the band, was hearing that.
Oh, really?
So in a way, and then of course 2112 became this iconic thing in our life, but Caress of Steel just sounded like, I don't think people can play like this, right? The way you guys have done. So it's amazing what felt like maybe a mistake or a sidetrack brought a whole bunch of other people into your fold.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting time for us, but we kept making our own mistakes and learning from them. And by the time we hit this record, we had a lot of confidence.
But the confidence that comes from making mistakes is different than the confidence that comes from winning all the time. It's a different kind of confidence, right? So I'm not sure you could have made this record the way you did if you hadn't had those experiences beforehand.
You're absolutely right. It's a completely different kind of confidence. This is more stepped. You work your way up. You learn what's the right thing to do. And when we got to this record, it was really that thing. There was a particular energy that was so positive. It was such a fun record to make. We had so much fun in the studio playing. Being up in the studio for, I guess, the second time by then was a treat for us. So we were all in such a good headspace. You know, when we did Witch Hunt, we were down on the driveway by the studio, out in the cold, being the mob, and doing that. I just have such great memories of that. Just we were laughing our heads off, and we were trying to be an angry mob. But if you listen closely, you can hear some of the things we were saying, and it was just a vibe about the whole thing that was so very positive.
Yeah. We set up microphones on the driveway, and all of us in our crew were grumbling into the mic and screaming absurd things. That was how we created this mob.
For
overdubbing it over and over and over again. From 8 people, we turned it into an angry mob of footballers.
Another thing that came up in that interview with Neil, the 30th, was how the Witch Hunt lyrics were relevant then. And when you listen to this record today, and it got me thinking, it's like, does anything really change? And I don't know how much it does.
It's so true. And a lot of things that Neil wrote about over the years are as valid today as they were then. and yet they were considered, inappropriate for a metal band to be talking about such things. But is it ever inappropriate? I don't think so.
No, I don't. I never grew up listening to kids' music.
But it's like there was that. Didn't Colin Quinn say it? A newspaper article in Austria. Oh no, like it says, a financial crisis. Like the headline of this paper was "Financial Crisis, Tension Amongst the Races." Something else, yeah. Like no jobs or whatever. And he's like, and it sounds like it's from today, but yeah, it was from Austria in like 1933 or something, or Germany in 33. Yeah. So it shows you, it's why Bob Dylan songs are timeless now too. Because if you write songs like that, like no matter what time you put it, like Blowing in the Wind, take Blowing in the Wind, even his biggest song. All the times they are changing, to be fair. You listen to the times and times they are changing, and it's as relevant today as it ever was. Like come mothers and fathers throughout the land, don't criticize what you don't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. I think it's fading. But either way, yeah, that's kind of, no matter where you put that, that's going to be true. At some point, your children become out of your command when they become their own person, and your old way of doing things is outdated. It's always going to be outdated, but to the new generation coming through, no matter what it is. And yeah, so Rush, yeah, having the same thing. But anyway, let's go.
And I don't really think that kids should. In a way, I know the value of it when you're an infant, but I kind of feel like you have to. I feel like you have to kind of have the trees rattled early.
Yeah.
At least in your mind.
Sparks.
Yeah. Who was that for you? How did because to be independent, to because you could have gone a million different ways from the late '60s into the early '70s. Rush you could have played 20 different genres. You're all different, talented enough. You could have done whatever you wanted. What were the things that you were being exposed to that led you to figure out that this is the way you wanted to be?
That's really a tough question to answer because our influences were so diverse and so there were so many different bands we loved. Of course, all the early British blues bands really got us started.
Yeah.
And we played very much in the style of all those early bands like John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, Jeff Beck, and people like that.
Cream.
Yeah.
Cream.
I remember, I think it was on Tom Sawyer, was the first Rush song I ever heard, and I reacted to it, and I think I said in that, are they English? I couldn't work out if it was English, because sometimes English bands sing with American accents, or, well, they're Canadian, but, yeah, it's a similar accent anyway, especially singing. But with the way it's funny he says that, because I think on my first ever Rush reaction, I said that they give me vibes of an English band. And so, yeah, that's where that come from.
For sure. And then as time went on and progressive rock became a huge influence to all of us, probably less so to Alex than it was to me, but and Neil was very influenced by progressive rock. And then you just start listening to all kinds of things. I was a big Joni Mitchell fan. I liked Paul Simon's songwriting. Al had his own things that he was into. And you brought all these things to the table in Rush, and it was fine. That nothing was verboten as long as we felt we could do it and we could do it authentically. It was fine. And so that's how our style morphed, I guess.
Yeah.
What were your influences then after?
I was probably more in sort of a rock vein, but certainly that progressive music was an influence.
Like, were you Zeppelin, Sabbath kind of rock, or?
Zeppelin, for sure. Humble Pie, Jeff Beck. But, I loved Yes, King Crimson. There was just so much music. But like Ged just said, listening to other things like Joni Mitchell, listening to the crafting of songs and what works and what doesn't work and what really stands out in a song and the pacing and all of those things about the structure of a song, you learn about that through listening. You don't maybe are not directly influenced by the music itself, but how it's constructed and how it works becomes the important thing, I think, and you carry that on forever.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people know that you had all these fake bands, right? Like, was it the Fabulous Men? Was that a band that you did?
Yeah, there was a Fabulous band.
There was a couple of them. Like
These were side bands.
yes, bands. And that you would like create these fake bands in your mind and just let's try to do it like this. Is that how you approach
Yeah,
it?
well,
in
Fabulous
soundtrack.
Men were a very new wave.
Yes.
They were fabulous, and they were men.
Yes. and I do have the tapes.
Of the Fabulous Men?
And there are
songs they did.
some tapes that shall remain.
Tapes.
We need to hear those.
Yeah.
But were songs on here from those kinds of sessions where you took on other...
Well, Vital Signs is a direct influence by the Fabulous Men.
Really?
Yeah, that's true.
There's
That's
no
very true.
doubt about it. Was inspired by our Fabulous Men persona, but
Was it just a chance for you to have some fun, or was it actually...
I also said in one of my Rush reactions that Rush is like the whole band has ADHD, but now from hearing this, it sounds more like split personality disorder.
a mechanism to push yourself?
no, it was fun.
Fun.
And if it pushed us and influenced us, that was accidental.
Yeah.
But fun is contagious, and you want to bring, especially for a band that writes about quote heavy topics, if you can ingest a bit of fun in it, that's all the better. Those were fun side things that we did usually while we were waiting to do our next take, because as the production staff was fucking around in there getting sounds or being on the phone or
Being on
something
the
like
phone
that.
for a long time.
You're sitting in there going, can we do this take already? And then you just break out into some jam thing that's how the Fabulous Men got.
You just call it, we're the Fabulous Men now, and away we go?
Yeah, we were just like,
There was one particular phone call that Terry Brown made to his mother in England. And he was on the phone for half an hour. And we stopped a take so that he could take the call. And we were just sitting there and sitting. And finally we started playing. And we actually went through many different genres.
That's right.
In that particular song.
Yeah.
The title of that song escapes me.
Yeah, but you remember, you just won't tell us.
But
No,
it is a classic.
The point is, you let yourself go.
Let's have a guess. Spirit of the radio, spirit for the whatever that one is. Spirit of the radio. Let's guess that one.
Because you can't just sit and wait. You're pent up. You're ready to record, and you just start jamming, and you vent your frustration through the microphone.
How much of the guys that you became in those days was directly related to your parents' stories? If you think about metal and rock, and growing up in Toronto in that era, it was a very different kind of place than most places in the world. A lot of new immigration here. You were from that. How much was that influencing who you were as songwriters and as performers and as the kind of men you wanted to become?
That's a good question because, those influences are kind of subterranean, they're subconscious. We were playing that kind of music to escape from all that shit, to escape from the home life, to escape from, in my case, a family that was, reassembled post-war and had its fair share of function and dysfunction. So, when
early trauma conversations, right? Like people are talking about trauma, but that was in your home because your parents had experienced some pretty heavy trauma.
Yeah, and Al's, tough working class family. So I think when we got together, it was to escape all that. And music was the salvation. We all dove into music because of that. We wanted to escape into that world.
But we were willing to work hard, and I think it was that work ethic that we learned from our parents. That was, like Ed said,
that's true.
Subconscious work ethic.
But it didn't feel like work.
It didn't feel like work. It felt great, but you were willing to work 24 hours a day on something if you needed to, just to make it as good as you could. You wouldn't think about it. It was a joy.
And it was those words, to make it. You know, you use those words, you thought about that idea, we're going to make it. We didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
Of course not. But if we worked hard enough and we got good enough, we might make it.
Yeah.
And that was our it was our version of running away to join the circus, really.
Right. And then suddenly the circus worked. It's like you made it. However, it became. When did you first figure
Took a
out?
long time.
It did take a long time, but not that long.
I guess not.
You know, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
You know, we know about the Kiss stories now because they're legendary. But my friend Bob sent me a picture today. It made me laugh. It was a concert ticket of it was Rush and the New York Dolls, and it was amazing to see this bill. And I'm looking at this,
Yeah.
thinking, you played with everybody. You played on bills that probably people think that wouldn't make sense, but New York Dolls seemed
We played on bills that didn't make sense. We opened for Sha Na Na.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
was a great
that
gig.
makes no sense.
At a Sadie Hawkins dance.
Yeah. In Baltimore, and we got booed off the
Oh,
stage.
screaming at us, so we just turned it up
Of course,
more and more.
and we
more.
should have got booed off the stage because they were all dressed like the Fonz, you know.
Yeah.
And here comes this like really loud metal band, and they're like, "What
the hell are you
fuck
doing
is
here?"
this?" You know. So yeah, so yeah, we played. We took every gig that was offered to us, pretty much.
The era of building your brand, like everybody talks about it now, wasn't really part of your lexicon back then, was it?
No, it wasn't. It didn't exist
No,
really.
it
You
didn't.
know, first of all, we were not a band that got airplay easily. We had I guess, in context of the times, it was a crude sound, and we sounded a little bit too much like Zepp and a little bit too much like Humble Pie. So you know, we were falling through the cracks. So
And then
the best way we could make friends and fans was to be on the road and to get out in front of people. So we opened for everybody we could, and we traveled constantly. And slowly, we built a groundswell.
But it was very gradual. I mean, it was really around the time of this album that it all finally came together. There were some tough, lean times, certainly. That period with Chris Steele, and but it was a very gradual thing, and that was 6 years right there. Plus, we've been playing together for 6 years before that. Right. So no overnight success. It took its time.
I think it's deceptive when you sit here in 2022 and you look back at a 50-year career and you go, oh, that didn't seem to take so long from the first record to 21. Well, that was just a couple of years. But when you're in that moment, it sure felt a lot longer. And you are experiencing all those difficulties on a daily basis. Like, when are we going? Can we afford to be on the road? There was times when we'd get stranded without gigs, and we'd be staying in a hotel in LA, and we didn't know when the next gig was, and we couldn't really afford to pay the hotel bill, so you just had to beg, borrow, steal money from the record company, tour support, whatnot. And that time lasted a lot longer than people realize, you know, that you were, you know, hand to mouth, tour to tour. And then suddenly things start to change. Fame is a lot easier to get than financial success.
Right.
So you give the appearance that you're successful, but you're still trying to make ends meet, and you're pouring every bit of profit you have back into the show to make it better. So you don't think about the show in practical terms. You think of it in terms of how can we make it better? So,
And I think people who have never been broke don't really understand that when you're broke, it's a year feels like 10 years, right? It feels like an insurmountable mountain or hill. It feels like it might never end. And it's really, we see this today in the world. It was one thing that I think that maybe why Rush lasts so long is that lyrically and culturally, when people kind of feel seen, even though some of it may seem fantasy-based, they feel seen that you're not a good times band, right? And it's not a good time set of lyrics. Like it's heavy times, and maybe partly.
But that's kind of what, again, I said when I first heard Working Man, and that got them, that was the track, wasn't it, that kind of took them off that got airplay in Cleveland. But I remember listening to it and thinking, yeah, I don't know how well that single did over here, but I would have thought it would have done well because, yeah, of that same thing, really. That there's just something, like, especially about a song like that, is very relatable to, Well, like Tupac said that he writes songs for poor people because there's always going to be poor people, and there's a lot more poor people than there are rich people. So if I write songs for poor people, I'll always have a job. And yeah, I think that is a very clued up way of looking at things. But yeah, let's go.
You experience those heavy times.
You never forget.
Yeah, you'll never really not be that person, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I know you don't like to do this, to talk about any of this stuff without Neil, but here we are, and you have 40 years, and this has got to be really difficult and strange and experience.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's, you know, life post Neil is still fresh in a way. And what can I say? I think he would be proud of this. And certainly be proud of the live aspect of this record because his playing is really good. And that's all he cared about. You know, well, I shouldn't say that's all he cared about, but that was first and foremost in his mind. So
he had said to me once that a big part of what you guys did was write stuff that was be a challenge to play live. Like, and there was always a song on the record that you would write knowing you couldn't play it live. Pre-technology, and that was important to you.
But that whole concept of having to play it live drove our arrangements, it drove our songwriting. And so we'd be in the middle of writing a song, well, we could do this, but if we do that, it's going to be impossible to play it live, so let's not do that. And so in some ways, you limited the scope of the song in order for you to be true to your live architecture, you know, the three-piece thing that could be convincing.
Again, I think that's another big input that the Beatles had. When the Beatles decided they wasn't going to tour anymore, they were just going to record, it completely changed their things, because then they started, well, it's like Ringo, I'm sure it's Ringo, when he says they have technology, like, and this is back then in the 60s, and he's like, where, like, they can make a guitar sound like a piano. He's like, and I know what you're thinking, why do you need a guitar to sound like a piano when you can just have a piano? Yeah, because the piano sound like drums. Yeah. But like, it was the same thing. Like, the reason the Beatles did that, because they started to make songs, or at least produce songs that you could not perform live on stage at that point. The technology just wasn't there. But I suppose that, just that alone, them deciding not to tour, had a big knock-on effect on music, and kind of open people up to what you can do. Well, it's what Bob Dylan said, didn't it? That's what the Beatles inspired with Bob Dylan. Is he heard the Beatles and then heard the potential that his songs could have with a band. Anyway, let's go.
Reproduced live. And that, for the longest time, was our mantra, really. It was only later years where we started going, fuck it. What does a song need?
It needs 15 tracks of guitar.
What does a song need? Does it really need that 15th track of guitar?
No, but it's cool.
But the strings are good. How are we going to reproduce the strings? We'll figure it out.
Well, then MIDI brought a lot of changes, I suppose.
MIDI changed everything.
changed
Synthes
everything.
changed everything. Samplers changed everything.
But those earlier the arrangements, when we went on the road, it sounded exactly the same as the record, which was really important.
This Maple Leaf Garden show is interesting because it's pre-tech in many respects, and there's these three guys crushing it on stage, and it does sound like the record in live, but it still feels live, right? And that's why I think it's an interesting choice to have this particular show.
Yeah.
As the one that people are very excited about that particular show.
They are.
Yeah.
I've read a couple of reviews, and fans are really pleased to have it because it's one night.
Yeah.
It's not a compilation, and it's just an actual reliving that night. And I thought the choice of Terry to mix it was really great. And it was nice to be in contact with him again. I mean, it was a little nostalgic, but at the same time, it's great getting emails, finding his name in my inbox, and having to talk about the songs again. And of course, many of them were right in his wheelhouse. That was his period of time. That we were very tight, during that Moving Pictures album. And he was our mentor in many, many ways. So it was appropriate to revisit this live tape with Terry at the helm.
When you hear back and you hear the three of you on stage, what do you think?
I don't know.
Could have done that better. Why did I play
Yeah,
that?
you
note?
just hear the shitty stuff.
Yeah, it's true. You do. You really do. And,
Boy,
and
I
it
really
never ends.
fuck that. There's a clam. Clam.
Yeah.
Clam.
I mean, you guys could have written easier songs to play, so
Yeah.
It's the other thought you have.
And then the other hand, you go, wow, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, so you're always reluctant to praise yourself looking back.
Yeah.
I saw the last show in LA, and I knew you guys wanted to keep being in Rush, and of course Neil didn't want to or couldn't, and then we lost him. And you're living in this very bizarre experience now because you two can still do it.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how you process that, how you figure your way through that.
Well, I'd say Al and I have different ways of dealing with that. And Al threw himself into little projects and bigger projects, and he kept working throughout the whole thing, and that was a real tonic for him.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that because when we went through our first set of tragedies with Neil back when he lost his wife and daughter, I did that. I threw myself into my solo album, and it saved me in many ways, and it fed me. Let's put it like that. And so for myself, I turned to writing, and I turned to book writing, and that was a way for me to not compete with that moment and those feelings, but a way to take stock and recharge my batteries in a different way. So we've handled it quite differently. But at the end of the day, it was a difficult thing to put aside. I mean, I don't think there are many bands that had a 45-year career that were as close as we were.
I know right after the tour, both Get and I felt like we still had a lot of gas in the tank. Yeah. The show looked great. We were playing really, really well. If we could just squeeze out another 150 shows, But
yeah, I was hoping that, let's be honest, it was frustrating to end when we ended. Yeah. I was frustrated because I worked so hard on that tour in terms of design and putting it all together and the whole concept of going backwards, a chronology that exposes itself or exploits itself while going back in time, And so I was really proud of it. I wanted to take it to Europe to play for the European fans. I wanted to take it to South America, and that wasn't going to happen. So it was truncated, in my view, in my mind. And I had to swallow that because I had to think of my friend's needs and what he wanted. But it was frustrating. And so we walked away from that, and we went to do our other things. I went traveling. Alex was golfing, and then Neil got sick. Yeah. And so what do you do with all those feelings?
Yeah.
Right.
You just throw them away because they don't mean anything anymore.
Did you at before you found out, I imagine maybe deep in some part of your heart?
We stopped there. I was going to stop at 20 minutes. I was going to say, I literally can't keep my eyes open, but then they started on that question of how they both dealt with Neil Peart's death. Yeah, that was interesting. It definitely kept me awake as well, because literally my eyes was, if you go back and watch, you'll see my eyes starting to shut. And then all of a sudden it was like, hold on. Yeah, this is a good question. It would be nice. It's just my luck that it would stop on a good question like that. And then, hearing kind of their answer to that, because I was like, well, there's, do you know what I mean? It's a trio. That's the three musketeers, and one of the musketeers isn't there. It's got to be, it's got to be hard for him. Yeah. But I do have to go to sleep now. Because literally, I was up at 2, watched UFC. It's now 8 o'clock in the morning. Right, yeah. But see, Liz, I knew there was another interview. I knew it. I just knew it. Because I was thinking, because I said I've got another interview, and she's like, I think you've done all the interviews I sent you. I was like, nah, I'm sure. I got another one. Yeah. But yeah, I need to go to sleep. That's the reaction. Morning, night.